Francis is the first pope from the Americas, the first of his name, and more than any other pope in recent memory, has dedicated his life and ministry to the poor, the peripheral, and the forgotten, all while leading the Catholic Church on difficult, sometimes controversial issues that not everyone supports. We were granted a rare interview at the Vatican and spoke to him in his native Spanish through a translator for more than an hour. Not lost in translation was the 87-year-old's warmth, intelligence, and conviction. We began by discussing the Church's first World Children's Day. Next weekend, Pope Francis will welcome tens of thousands of young people to the Vatican, including refugees of war. During World Children's Day, the UN says over 1 million people will be facing famine in Gaza, many of them children.
No solo en Gaza.
Not just in Gaza. Think of Ukraine. Many kids from Ukraine come here. You know something? That those children don't know how to smile. I'll say something to them. They have forgotten how to smile, and that is very painful.
Do you have a message for Vladimir Putin when it comes to Ukraine?
Please, warring countries, all of them, stop the war. You must find a way of negotiating for peace. Strive for peace. A negotiated peace is always better than an endless war.
What's happening in Israel and Gaza has caused so much division, so much pain around the world. I don't know if you've seen in the United States big protests on college campuses and growing anti-Semitism. What would you say about how to change that?
All ideology is bad. And anti-Semitism is an ideology, and it is bad. Any anti is always bad. You can criticize one government or another, the government of Israel, the Palestinian government. You can criticize all you want, but not anti a people. Neither anti-Palestinian nor anti-Semitic, no.
I know you call for peace. You have called for a ceasefire in many of your sermons. Can you help negotiate peace?
What I can do is pray. I pray a lot for peace. And also to suggest, please stop, negotiate.
Prayer has been at the center of the Pope's life since he was born, Jorge Mario Bergoglio, in Argentina in 1936 into a family of Italian immigrants. Before entering the seminary, Bergoglio worked as a chemist. His own personal formula is simplicity. He still wears the plain silver cross he wore as the Archbishop of Buenos Aires. Though it's not what Francis wears, but where he lives that set the tone for his papacy 11 years ago. Instead of a palace above St. Peter's Square, he chose the Vatican guest house, Casa Santa Marta, as his home. We met him there under a painting of the Virgin Mary. Surrounded by the sacred, Francis has not forsaken his sense of humor, even when discussing serious subjects like the migrant crisis. My grandparents were Catholic, immigrated from Northern Ireland in the 1930s to the United States, seeking a better life. And I know your family, too, fled fascism. And you have talked about, with migrants, many of them children, that you encourage governments to build bridges, not walls.
Migration is something that makes a country grow. They say that you Irish migrated and brought the whiskey, or that the Italians migrated and brought the mafia. It's a joke. Don't take it badly. But migrants sometimes suffer a lot. They suffer a lot.
I grew up in Texas, and I don't know if you've heard, but the state of Texas is attempting to shut down a Catholic charity on the border with Mexico that offers undocumented migrants humanitarian assistance. What do you think of that?
Una locura.
That is
una locura.
madness, sheer
Cerrar la
madness.
frontera,
To close the border and leave them there,
dejarlos ahí, que
that is
es una
madness.
locura.
The migrant
tiene
has
que
to
ser
be
recibido.
received.
Después se ve cómo se
Thereafter, you
trata.
see how you're going to
Quizás
deal
hay
with
que
them.
mandarlo de
Maybe
vuelta,
you have
no
to
sé,
send
pero
them back. I don't
cada
know.
caso se
But each
discute
case
con
ought to be
humanidad.
considered humanely,
Con humanidad.
right?
A few months after becoming Pope, Francis went to a small Italian island near Africa to meet migrants fleeing poverty and war. Your first trip as Pope was to the island of Lampedusa, where you talked about suffering. And I was so struck when you talked about the globalization of indifference. What is happening?
Do you want me to state it plainly? People wash their hands.
Hay tanto Poncio Pilato
There are
suelto.
so many Pontius Pilates on the loose out there
Ve lo que está
who
sucediendo.
see what is
la guerra,
happening,
las
the wars, the
injusticias,
injustice, the
los
crimes.
crímenes. Está
That's
bien,
okay,
está bien.
that's okay,
Y se lavan
and
las
wash
manos.
their hands.
La indiferencia.
It's indifference.
Cuando
That
el
is what
corazón
happens when the
se
heart
vuelve
hardens
duro
and becomes indifferent.
que es indiferente. Por favor,
Please,
tenemos que
we have to get
volver
our
a
hearts to
componer
feel
sensible
again.
el corazón. No podemos
We cannot
estar
remain indifferent in the
indiferentes
face of such human
a estos dramas de
dramas.
la humanidad. La
The
globalización
globalization of
de la indiferencia
indifference is a
una
very
enfermedad
ugly
muy
disease.
fea, muy fea.
Very ugly.
Pope Francis has not been indifferent to the Church's most insidious scandal, the rampant sexual abuse of hundreds of thousands of children worldwide for decades. You have done more than anyone to try and reform the Catholic Church and repent for years of unspeakable sexual abuse against children by members of the clergy. But has the Church done enough?
Tiene que
It
seguir
must
haciendo.
continue to do more.
Lamentablemente,
Unfortunately, the tragedy of the abuses is enormous.
Es tremendo.
And
Sobre
against
eso,
this, an
conciencia
upright
recta,
conscience,
y
and
no-
not only to not permit it,
no
but
solo
to
no
put in
permitir,
place the
sino que
conditions
poner
so
las
that it does
condiciones
not
para que
happen.
no suceda.
You have said zero tolerance.
It cannot be tolerated.
Cuando
When
hay
there is a
caso
case of a religious
de
man or
consagrado,
woman who
una
abuses,
consagrada que abusa,
the full force of the law
cae
falls
toda
upon
la
them.
ley encima.
In this, there has been a
En
great
eso
deal of
progresó
progress.
muchísimo.
It's Francis's capacity for forgiveness and openness that has defined his leadership of the Church's nearly 1.4 billion Catholics. He put them and the world on notice during an impromptu press conference on a plane in 2013, when he spoke on the subject of homosexuality.
Si una persona è gay,
If someone is gay, he said, and he searches for the Lord and has goodwill, who am I to judge? And he did not stop there. Last year, you decided to allow Catholic priests to bless same-sex couples. That's a big change. Why?
No, yo lo que
No,
permití
what I allowed was
no fue
not to
bendecir
bless the
la
union.
unión. No. Eso no se
That
puede
cannot be
porque
done because
no
that
es
is
el
not the
sacramento
sacrament.
eso. No
I
puede, el
cannot.
Señor lo hizo
The
así.
Lord made it that
Pero
way.
sí
But to
bendecir
bless each
cada
person,
persona.
yes.
La
The
bendición
blessing
es
is
para
for
todos,
everyone.
para
For
todos.
everyone.
Bendecir una
To
unión
bless a homosexual
de
type
tipo
union,
homosexual
however, goes
va
against the
contra
given
el
right,
derecho,
against the
derecho
law of the
natural, el
church.
derecho de la iglesia. Pero bendecir
But to
a
bless
cada
each person,
persona, ¿por qué no?
Why
La
not?
bendición es para
The blessing is
todos.
for all.
Algunos se escandalizaron
Some people were
por eso.
scandalized by this, but
¿Por qué?
why? Everyone.
Todos,
Everyone.
todos.
You have said, who am I to judge? Homosexuality is not a crime.
No, it's a
Es un
human
hecho humano.
fact.
There are conservative bishops in the United States that oppose your new efforts to revisit teachings and traditions. How do you address their criticism?
You
Usted
used
es
an
un
adjective, conservative.
Conservadores. Es decir, el
That is,
conservador es
conservative
aquel
is one who
que se
clings
aferra
to something and
y
does
no
not
quiere
want
ver
to
más
see
allá.
beyond that.
Es una
It is a
actitud
suicidal
suicida.
attitude.
Porque
Because
una
one
cosa
thing
es
is to take
tener en
tradition
cuenta
into account,
la
to
tradición,
consider
tener en
situations
cuenta
from the
las
past,
situaciones de la iglesia,
but
pero
quite
otra cosa
another
es
is to be
cerrarse.
closed up inside a dogmatic box.
Dogmática cuadrada.
Pope Francis has placed more women in positions of power than any of his predecessors. but he told us he opposes allowing women to be ordained as priests or deacons. Francis's devotion to traditional doctrine led one Vatican reporter to note that he's changed the tune of the church, but the lyrics essentially remain the same. This frustrates those who want to see him change policy on Roman Catholic priests marrying, contraception, and surrogate motherhood.
I know women who are cancer survivors who cannot bear children, and they turn to surrogacy. This is against church doctrine.
In regard to surrogate motherhood, in the strictest sense of the term, no, it is not authorized. Sometimes surrogacy has become a business, and that is very bad. It is very bad.
But sometimes for some women it is the only hope.
It could be. The other hope is adoption. I would say that in each case, the situation should be carefully and clearly considered. Consulting medically, and then morally as well. I think there is a general rule in these cases, but you have to go into each case in particular to assess the situation, as long as the moral principle is not skirted. But you are right. I want to tell you that I really liked your expression when you told me, in some cases, it is the only chance. It shows that you feel these things very deeply.
I think that's why so many people have found hope with you, because you have been more open and accepting, perhaps, than other previous leaders of the church.
You have to be open to everything. The church is like that. Everyone. That so-and-so is a sinner. Me too, I am a sinner. Everyone. The gospel is for everyone. If the church places a customs officer at the door, that is no longer the Church of Christ. Everyone.
When you look at the world, what gives you hope?
Everything. You see tragedies, but you also see so many beautiful things. You see heroic mothers, heroic men, men who have hopes and dreams, women who look to the future. That gives me a lot of hope. People want to live. People forge ahead. And people are fundamentally good. We are all fundamentally good. Yes, there are some rogues and sinners, but the heart itself is good.
Almost exactly 4 years ago, the Cathedral of Notre Dame in Paris caught fire. It was one of those 21st century moments that people around the world experience together, staring in horror at live video on their smartphones and televisions. For the people of France, it was especially traumatic, because Notre Dame has been a powerful symbol, both sacred and secular, since medieval times. French President Emmanuel Macron pledged that Notre Dame would be reopened by the end of 2024. He couldn't have known then how hard it would be to keep that promise. But on this Easter Sunday, 4 years later, the resurrection of the great cathedral seems within reach. Flames tore through the roof of Notre Dame on the evening of April 15, 2019, and spread with incredible speed and ferocity, engulfing her 200-foot spire.
Everybody stops.
Jean-Louis Georgelin is the man now in charge of restoring Notre Dame.
And a lot of people in France cry because they feel that something very deep in the soul of France, in the spirit of France, was about to collapse.
Only a heroic effort by the Paris Fire Brigade saved Notre Dame from collapse. as a few staffers raced through falling embers to rescue precious relics. Philippe Villeneuve, the cathedral's chief architect, was out of town that night and raced back to Paris. He was devastated by what he saw. I've said that the little boy who was in love with the cathedral and the architect who was in charge of it died that day, and another man took over and said, "I have to save the cathedral. It's my mission. It's my duty." Villeneuve now shares that duty. If he's the artist who knows every inch of stone in Notre Dame, retired Army General Georges Laine is the commander, called back to meet that 5-year deadline.
I will relax only when this will be done.
What does this cathedral mean to the people of France?
The Cathedral Notre Dame de Paris is in some way the heart of France. For the Catholic, of course, for the Christian, but for everybody. All the great events of France in some way or another took place here in the cathedral.
Napoleon crowned himself emperor in Notre Dame in 1804. In 1944, as Paris was liberated from Nazi occupation, General Charles de Gaulle braved sniper fire to enter the cathedral.
In many ways, you could say that she's the People's Palace.
Agnès Poirier is a journalist and author who lives and works just across the River Seine from Notre Dame. She and her neighbors watched the most horrifying moment the night of the fire, the collapse of that imposing spire.
I remember the scream of the crowd saying no, as if they couldn't conceive such a thing.
That spire meant so much to Philippe Villeneuve that he had it tattooed on his arm.
On dit que j'ai Notre Dame dans la peau.
They say that I have Notre Dame in my skin, he told us. It's very practical because when I have to explain how the spire fell, it's always better to show that from here to there it tipped over. The huge spire, made of oak and covered in lead tiles, crashed through 2 of the stone vaults which form the ceiling of Notre Dame, leaving gaping holes at the top and heaps of broken stone and charred wood on the floor below.
Deuxième élément, c'est l'espèce de tabouret.
The top priority was to shore up the grand cathedral's weakened structure. Huge temporary wooden supports were placed under the surviving stone vaults of her ceiling and under the flying buttresses to save this prime example of medieval engineering.
We have to check every stone in the cathedral, every pillar.
At the same time, a huge decontamination project was mounted to remove lead tiles that had melted from the burning roof and spire and all the toxic lead dust spread by the fire. 4 years on, workers still take extraordinary precautions against lead poisoning. We had to wear disposable hazmat suits to enter the cathedral. Tons of rubble had to be removed. Paintings and stained glass windows were taken away for restoration, and twisted steel scaffolding erected for ongoing restoration work had to be dismantled.
So you were in the process of restoring the spire when the fire broke out in 2019. Did your restoration project have anything to do with the fire breaking out?
Une enquête a toujours lieu.
An investigation is still underway, Philippe Villeneuve told us, and no cause of the fire has been identified. But personally, it's unbearable. This fire never should have happened, and it did. Inevitably, I feel responsible.
So, you know...
At that point in our interview, Villeneuve switched to English with a rueful smile.
In reality, I'm totally destroyed.
Really?
Yes. I so want to rebuild Notre Dame is because I want to rebuild myself.
The fire's deeply emotional impact on Philippe Villeneuve was mirrored around the world. Nearly $1 billion in private donations have been pledged to rebuild Notre Dame, most of it from France, $50 million from Americans.
I know many people in the United States contributed.
they can contribute again.
They can continue to contribute, huh?
The cash is always running. If I want, give me money, I need.
In the weeks immediately following the fire, all sorts of ideas were floated for how centuries-old Notre Dame might be given a touch of avant-garde.
And all those architects throughout the world said, yes, let's have a roof garden, let's have a golden torch, let's have a titanium spire. You know, even I, for 20 seconds, I thought, to add some 21st century genius to Notre Dame, why not?
Chief architect Philippe Villeneuve had a very simple answer, why not?
Un monument historique, une cathédrale.
An historic monument, a cathedral, is not something to be played with, he told us. Notre Dame had been standing for 850 years with a wooden frame and a lead roof. So wood is the way to go. In the end, President Macron and a special committee agreed to rebuild Notre Dame exactly as she had been, and with the same materials: stone, wood, and lead.
How is it that the traditionalists won out?
Well, I think wisdom won.
Notre Dame's signature spire was a fairly recent addition. Images of the cathedral from the mid-1800s show her without a spire and in an advanced state of decay.
The cathedral was in great disrepair, was it not?
It was about to collapse, but of neglect, not of fire.
There were even proposals to demolish Notre Dame before the cathedral crumbled on its own. Instead, the French government hired a young architect named Viollet-le-Duc. He created that famous spire.
So you are rebuilding the spire exactly as Viollet-le-Duc?
Yes.
Are you using his original drawings?
On a eu la chance.
We were lucky, he said, because it was extremely well documented. We have the drawings of Viollet-le-Duc, the sketches, the surveys. We have everything needed to be able to remake it. 1,000 French oak trees were felled for the new spire, then fine cut by carpenters in eastern France. In other workshops around the country, the cathedral's organ, the largest in France, and many of its stained glass windows were restored.
How many workers and craftsmen do you have on this project?
If we take into account all the people in France, it's about 1,000 people.
Allons-y.
On the plaza in front of Notre Dame, a huge tent has been erected where stonecutters and sculptors are recreating Gothic gargoyles and adornments damaged in the fire. Philippe Villeneuve supervises every detail.
Et je leur fais mettre les doigts sur des feuilles.
I'll make them put their fingers on the layers of the original sculpture, he said, and then on the layer they're sculpting.
So he wants you to feel it, not just look at it.
Yeah.
And that works?
Yeah, I think too.
Danae Leblanc is just 23 years old, sculpting and chiseling to recreate a floral detail carved hundreds of years ago. We try to remake things identically, she said, but we are also trying to understand the intention of the original sculptors. So we look at the traces left by their tools. We were given rare access to the painstaking restoration of Notre Dame as workers and artisans revived the cathedral's exterior,
The towers of the cathedral.
and her interior.
Oh, my God.
The cathedral's great rose windows have been meticulously cleaned,
Look at this.
and every inch of stone coated with latex, which, when peeled away, leaves the surface gleaming. We found restorers, Mathilde Maire and Aude Massimi, working on painted stone sculptures depicting scenes from the life of Christ.
How old is this?
This part of the cathedral, she said, was built at the beginning of the 14th century. These sculptures are medieval. The restorers are carefully wiping every surface with small cotton swabs dipped in a water-based cleaning solution.
So I think you have to have a lot of patience.
Yes.
Yes, she says, you have to be calm and know that it will take time. but it's a pleasure.
You can see she's wiping away the centuries.
Yeah.
A 600-ton maze of scaffolding has been built inside Notre Dame to support all the work, especially the rebuilding of the spire. General Georges Land took us up through it, 2/3 of the way on a construction elevator. We reached the top, climbing steps and ladders.
This is incredible.
We were standing 100 feet above the cathedral floor, in exactly the spot where the flaming spire collapsed. 4 years ago, there was nothing here but a vast hole.
The drama took place here, and we have to rebuild the vault of the transept. The spire will be there, 66 meters high.
At the top of the old 200-foot spire sat a copper sculpture of a rooster, the symbol of the French people. The day after the fire, Philippe Villeneuve found it on a lower roof, a bit mangled but miraculously untouched by the flames. It has been left as it was found and will be put on display in the restored cathedral. Can I tell you, Villeneuve says, that I plan to put a new rooster on top of a new spire 1 year to the day before the reopening of the cathedral. There will still be scaffolding, but the frame of the spire will again be in the sky of Paris.
And the spire will rest on these 4 pillars you see here. You see?
Be magnificent.
Magnificent, yes, for the glory of God and France.
Next Sunday, the doors of the Cathedral of Notre Dame in Paris will open to the public for the first time since April 2019, when a devastating fire nearly destroyed the great Gothic church. 2 formal masses will be celebrated, and then as many as 40,000 visitors a day will begin streaming through. What they will see is something of a modern miracle. Notre Dame has been rebuilt and restored 5 years after the world watched it burn. 2 weeks ago, we were given unique access inside the cathedral as workers and artists applied the final touches. Many people deserve credit for the resurrection of Notre Dame, but none more than French President Emmanuel Macron. You made a promise the day after Notre Dame burned in 2019, and you said, quote, "We will rebuild Notre Dame more beautiful than before, and I want it done in the next 5 years." Did you have any doubts when you said that might be possible?
If you have a doubt, it's already over.
Well, someone we spoke to called it a moonshot moment.
This 5 years was a sort of new frontier.
Yeah.
This is perfectly true. When I announced the 5 years, all the experts, a lot of people just made comments to say he's crazy.
So what gave you the confidence while Notre Dame was still smoking it?
I saw these guys, these firemen, just going beyond their own capacities with such energy and commitment. And I think this is a sort of the metaphor of what our societies, and especially our democracies, need. Make possible the unthinkable.
We are all very proud of what we have done together.
Last year, President Macron appointed Philippe Jost to lead the team restoring Notre Dame. 2 weeks ago, we met him just inside what was still an active construction zone.
What words come to mind when you first walk in?
The light is very breathtaking, and the space. In this monument, there is a soul.
A soul.
The soul. And we feel that when we enter now, we feel that.
To walk into Notre Dame today is to see no sign of 2019. Then, the cathedral's nave was littered with burnt wood and stone rubble, a gaping hole in the ceiling where the flaming spire crashed through. Even when we visited in 2023, a dense forest of scaffolding remained. Now, it is open and airy, Every stone shines, every stained glass window is polished, every masterpiece glows, all topped by a new spire and a new roof, replacing the utter destruction of 5 years ago.
We had the big vault there to rebuild.
So there was a gaping hole.
A big hole there. When President Macron said 5 years, we knew that this point here was the most challenging space of the restoration.
If Philippe Jost is now commander-in-chief of the restoration, Philippe Villeneuve remains its artistic director. Chief architect of the cathedral since well before the fire, we saw him in 2023 supervising every detail and every artisan.
You also told us that rebuilding Notre Dame was, in a way, rebuilding yourself after the fire. Do you feel rebuilt now?
Oui.
Yes, Villeneuve told us. Today, I can watch images of the fire, see the spire falling into the flames. That's something I couldn't watch before. Last year, Villeneuve supervised the construction of a new wooden spire and its lead covering, and designed a new rooster, a symbol of the French people, for its very peak. It was put in place last December.
Et lorsque j'ai vu surgir la flèche et la couverture en plomb.
When I saw the spire and the lead roof appear, Villeneuve said, when we put the rooster and the cross in place, I felt that a wound had been closed.
Since more than 8 centuries, this cathedral was here. It resisted to 2 world wars, so many battles and campaigns. The decision to rebuild Notre Dame, it was about our capacity to save, restore, sometimes reinvent what we are by preserving where we come from. This is a message of achievement.
Many of the achievements, like the new spire and roof, are massive. Notre Dame's huge bells were removed after the fire for cleaning and repair, then returned and tested a few weeks ago. Its organ, with 8,000 pipes, the largest in France, was also removed, repaired, and reinstalled. The day we were there, an organist filled the cathedral with thunderous, soaring sound. Somehow, small achievements feel just as noteworthy. Outside, workmen dangling on ropes to hammer wood into place, and carefully cementing paving stones. Inside, delicately applying wax to ancient wood, ensuring that every light bulb is lit and every floor polished.
Our job is mostly to bring back all the value of mural painting.
Painting restorer Diana Castillo has been working in the many small chapels of Notre Dame, where centuries ago murals were painted onto stone walls and ceilings.
We had a lot of work to clean them.
Diana shared photos and video of what the chapels and paintings looked like when she and other restorers began their work after the fire, cloudy and dim, and their appearance now, after cleaning.
So we did one chapel after another, and after we finished the cleaning process, it was really almost 1 year. We were like, okay, now we can see the paint, now we can appreciate it and start the restoration.
So you were not just removing the soot from the fire, but you were removing the grime from centuries.
Exactly. From 1850, actually. Many of them had never been touched since 1850, so you imagine, 170 years.
Today, the murals are gleaming. Ceilings show starry nights of deep blue and gold, and stone columns that had been gray are now kaleidoscopes of color.
And you have brought those colors back to life.
Absolutely, yes. And I'm sure many people will be shocked. And the results like this are very satisfying for us, of course.
Similar transformations are everywhere in the new Notre Dame. Stone walls and ceilings that had been dark and gloomy seem to shine, and so do the many marble statues and decorative metalworks. The workers and craftspeople who have pulled all this off are known as companions, and their work is celebrated on huge banners overlooking the River Seine.
We've heard of something called the Notre Dame effect, which is young people being drawn to traditional crafts and trades because of the work they're doing and seeing being done here at the cathedral. Have you witnessed that?
Évidemment, Notre-Dame a été une formidable école pour tous les...
It's true, Philippe Villeneuve told us, that Notre Dame was a formidable school for all the different crafts: carpenters, metalworkers, stone carvers, painters. All these kinds of jobs were boosted by the restoration.
I visited the site a few times, and each time what struck me the most was the commitment and the joy and the responsibility of the companions that I met.
Anne Diaz-Griffin was born in France and educated in the U.S., where she runs an investment firm. She has helped mobilize financial support in America to revitalize Notre Dame. Why do you think this symbol of Paris and of France inspires such strong feelings, not just here, but in the U.S. and around the world?
Notre Dame symbolizes something universal, and that's something to be cherished.
Anne's contribution to the restoration effort was one of the largest from anyone in the U.S.
The support from Americans was just tremendous. There were over 45,000 donors who contributed funds to the cathedral for a sum of over $57 million. So we should be incredibly proud of that.
Every penny of that has been needed. The total cost of restoring Notre Dame is nearing $1 billion, including, Philippe Jost told us, for measures to prevent another tragedy.
So you have new fire detection, new fire suppression systems that have all been installed?
Installed in the roof.
So that would prevent another catastrophe like this from ever happening again?
We are very confident in that. It will not happen again.
Jost also expressed confidence that rebuilding the new Notre Dame using the old materials of wood and stone and lead will help it to last.
The cathedral is 860 years old, and we will restore it for 860 years.
That it will last another
860 years, and perhaps more.
Architect Philippe Villeneuve championed the use of traditional materials, especially to build the towering new spire just as the old one had been constructed. But he let us in on a secret. There is one new touch up there.
J'ai laissé moi-même une petite trace de moi.
I left a small mark of myself, he told us. In one of the hooks of the new spire is my face, with an admiring and affectionate look to represent all the companions who rebuilt the cathedral.
How are you?
Bonjour, Monsieur le Président.
President Macron visited Notre Dame while we were there, when it was still buzzing with preparations for opening day.
It's impressive and very moving to see we still have dozens of people working hard. Finished the job.
And as Notre Dame's great doors reopen, might that spirit be even a little bit contagious? There's a lot of political division here in France, as there is in the United States. So in this climate, how important is it to have a project like this that unifies rather than divides?
We speak about a moment of unity and pride. And this is exactly what our nations need, especially in that times. We should try to consider this type of moments and great projects and saying, if we're ready and able to do so, why don't we try to fix other, perhaps more abstract, but very important big issues of our countries?
So the impossible is not impossible, huh?
Definitely, it's French motto. Impossible is not French.
With a grueling pandemic and gruesome political season, you'd be forgiven for giving up on the idea of miracles. But tonight, we will take you to a place that's known for them. The sanctuary of Our Lady of Lourdes in southern France is the site of 70 medical miracles recognized by the Catholic Church. The Marian Shrine is famous to the faithful, but less well known is the Lourdes Office of Medical Observations. That's where world-renowned doctors and researchers conduct decade-long investigations into the countless claims of cures reported over the years. They determine which cases can be medically explained and which cannot. It's those church officials might call a miracle. For the doctors, it's a lesson in the limits of medicine. For the devout, it's divine intervention. The small French town of Lourdes, tucked in the foothills of the Pyrenees Mountains, draws more than 3 million pilgrims every year, more than travel to Mecca or Jerusalem. And almost everyone you meet will tell you they've heard stories of miracles here. But we heard none more inspiring than that of Sister Bernadette Mouriot.
I really tried everything I could, but this is something that cannot be healed.
What was your prognosis?
Full, total paralysis. The prognosis was really dark.
Strolling with 83-year-old Sister Mouriot through the chapel grounds in Brel, France, we found it hard to believe that for half her life she suffered from cauda equina, a disorder of the nerves and lower spine.
You wore this all the time?
Her left foot, she said, was twisted and limp. To walk at all, she needed this back and leg brace, an implant to dull nerve pain, and massive doses of morphine. She told us she had exhausted all treatment options, so in 2008, her doctor convinced her to make a pilgrimage to Lourdes.
Did you believe in miracles at the time?
I always believed in miracles, but not for me.
So why did you decide to go?
Well, I didn't go there for a miracle, I just went there to pray with others. Lourdes is a place where the smallest people, or the sickest, or the poorest, they come first.
The sickest, the poorest, the diseased and debilitated, bearing wounds visible and hidden, come from all over the world, seeking to be healed by the shrine's natural spring waters and the power of prayer.
And so I've asked for complete healing or a super long remission.
This was Kim Halpin's first pilgrimage. She found out last year she has incurable blood cancer and came all the way from Kansas to cleanse herself in the waters of Lourdes.
Are you expecting to be healed?
Not necessarily. Ask for as much as I want, and maybe I will be blessed with part of it, which will be okay.
Halpin was aided by her son Sean. We couldn't help but notice there are as many volunteers as sick here. The Our Lady of Lourdes Hospitality North American volunteers helped Jamie Jensen travel from Minnesota for his 18th visit.
Even though the camera sees that I have a condition and a chair, when I'm here, I don't have a condition.
Jensen's condition is cerebral palsy. All those trips to Lourdes haven't given him the physical miracle he wanted, but maybe, he says, he got the miracle he needed.
I was very bitter, very angry with myself.
Did coming to Lourdes change your heart?
Very much.
Do you consider that a miracle?
I do, because there's a peace within myself.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray.
Stories of inner peace and acceptance don't meet the bar for the Office of Medical Observations, And with just 70 medical miracles recognized in 160 years, you'd have better odds playing the lotto. Yet thousands of faithful line up at the baths and at this grotto where the first miracle is said to have occurred. The sanctuary, with its 3 basilicas and 25 chapels, is laid out like a grand theater complex, its many stages offering dozens of pious performances throughout the day. The finale, a candle-lit procession every night. There would be none of this were it not for Saint Bernadette. According to Catholic lore, in 1858, a mysterious woman appeared in this grotto to Bernadette Soubirous, a 14-year-old peasant girl. Jean-Marc Mica, the Bishop of Lourdes, says the woman spoke with Soubirous several times over 5 months.
And once, the 25th of March, day of the Annunciation, she said, "I am the Immaculate Conception."
When word got out the Immaculate Conception, the Virgin Mary, had appeared in Lourdes, people flocked to this grotto and within days started making claims of miracle cures, the ability to walk, restored sight. Worried about fueling mass hysteria, the Church set up the Office of Medical Observations in 1883 to investigate the claims. Which brings us back to the other Bernadette in our story. 14 years ago, Sister Moreau found herself in a wheelchair in a procession at Lourdes seeking the intervention of Saint Bernadette.
And I really had that feeling that the Lord was walking with us. And I heard him giving me these words, "I see your suffering and that of your sick brothers and sisters. Just give me everything."
You heard the voice of Jesus.
Yes, I heard this in a voice. I can't really tell you whose voice it was. It was like a spiritual experience.
She said she returned home rejuvenated spiritually, but physically she felt worse. After 3 days in excruciating pain, she told us she suddenly found the strength to walk to the chapel and pray.
Then I felt some kind of heat coming into my body. I felt relaxed, but I didn't really know what that was meaning. And in my room, I heard this inner voice again telling me, "Take all your braces off." I didn't think twice, and I started taking my foot brace off. And my foot, that used to be crooked, was straight, and I could actually put it on the ground without feeling any pain.
All of a sudden, your foot was straight.
Yes, like that, like the way it is just now. And so I kept going.
She says she took off the braces and stopped the morphine all at once.
Did this make sense to you?
No, I knew it was impossible.
She came to my door with her doctor, and she said, "Last year I came to Lourdes on pilgrimage, and 3 days after I got back home, I was cured."
Dr. Alessandro De Franciscis hears stories like that all the time. As the president and residing physician at the Lourdes Office of Medical Observations, the former pediatrician's job is to determine whether there is more to those stories by applying 7 strict criteria established by the Church.
And we're looking for a diagnosis. And if that diagnosis is a diagnosis of a severe disease with a severe prognosis, and then we want to make sure that that person is a person that was cured in a way that one would say suddenly, in an instantaneous way, in a complete way, and in a way lasting in time. And my 7th criteria that has to match is there must be no possible explanation to that cure. Sister Bernadette Moreau.
Here on the end. He showed us the archives, which hold thousands of recorded claims of cures.
This feels like it's almost 10 pounds.
10 pounds, I think.
Dr. De Franciscis, a practicing Catholic, told us what separates the more than 7,000 claims of cures from the 70 the Church calls miracles is an ungodly amount of medical documentation and patients like Sister Moreau willing to put their lives under a microscope.
We sent her to 2 different neurologists. We sent her to different rheumatologists because of the different specific case of her disease. We asked to repeat twice all sorts of imagery, electrophysiology. We did all that you would do in medicine to be absolutely sure of her diagnosis, and it was.
But he wanted to confirm something else.
I was asked to meet with 2 psychiatrists in Paris. They wanted to know if I was lying, if I had already had any hallucinations, if I had levitated. I remember answering, "No, doctor, I never left the ground floor."
Satisfied, Dr. De Franchisis sent Sister Moreau's case to a group of 33 doctors and professors called the International Medical Committee of Lourdes. Its job is to determine whether a cure is what they consider medically unexplained.
We're not trying to rule something in or rule something out. We're just trying to be objective.
You could call them the devil's advocates. Dr. Michael Moran, a surgical oncologist. Dr. Jacek Mostwin, a professor of urology at Johns Hopkins. And Dr. Kieran Moriarty, a renowned addiction specialist, scrutinized Sister Moreau's case.
Is there anything that could have caused her response?
No treatment would be that effective that quickly.
Does religion enter into your medical conversation?
We cannot separate ourselves as people who have been deeply immersed in the culture and the traditions of Lourdes and the church. But make no mistake, we're just as technical as a forensic pathologist when it comes to looking at the technical details of the case.
After 8 years of investigation, the committee determined that Sister Moreau's case was medically unexplained.
So when you do a survey, the investigation of Sister Bernadette's or any of the other cures, this is done on a purely medical basis, something that could be peer-reviewed by other physicians outside.
Not could, that is.
They are peer-reviewed.
I have estimated, I can affirm with absolute certainty that the case of Sister Bernadette had been reviewed, read, expertised by at least 300 physicians. 300 physicians. And if tomorrow morning any of our viewers is a doctor, and one day he stops in southern France and comes to see me and wants to look into the file of Sister Bernadette, I'll be delighted to show him, because we have, everything is open and collegial and no secrets.
The secret is the mystery of it all, and on that, the Church gets the last word.
Amen.
In 2018, a decade after her cure, Sister Moreau's case was declared the 70th miracle of Lourdes.
Declaring a miracle is saying God did something. This is the miracle. And the doctors cannot go on that land, on that field.
When I told people I was coming here, I got a lot of people who told me, oh, come on, there's got to be some explanation that we just don't know. What do you say to the skeptics?
Come and see. Be open. Don't be narrow-minded. Be open to believe that the real world is wider than the visible one.
It's been said about Lourdes, for those who believe no explanation is necessary. For those who do not, no explanation is possible.